We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this on the grounds of the White House.
John Jones called us last night and retired. John Jones is officially retired.
I will come up with a great strategy, and I'll come with full confidence.
There has never been anything in the history of this sport quite like the UFC White House card. Not the Sphere event, not Madison Square Garden, not Abu Dhabi. When President Donald Trump stood at a rally in Iowa in July of 2025 and announced that the UFC was going to hold a championship fight on the grounds of the White House,
We're going to have a UFC fight. Think of this on the grounds of the White House.
something shifted in the MMA world that has not stopped shifting since. The event is scheduled for June 14, 2026, on the South Lawn of the White House. It is Trump's 80th birthday. It is Flag Day. Fighters will walk from the Oval Office to the Octagon.
The fighters are going to walk out of the Oval Office.
Weigh-ins will be held at the Lincoln Memorial. Dana White says it will cost upward of $60 million to produce, the most expensive event in UFC history by a margin that is almost impossible to comprehend. There will be somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people on the South Lawn itself, and up to 85,000 more watching on screens across the street at the Ellipse. And as of right now, not a single fight on the card has been officially announced. What we do know is this: the card has 6 to 7 fights total.
We were going to do 6 fights. I might actually do 7.
6 to 7 spots for an event that every fighter on the roster has been publicly begging to be part of for the better part of a year. And what has followed from that math is one of the most chaotic, most dramatic, most revealing sequences of fighter behavior the sport has ever produced. Because when the stakes are this high, people show you exactly who they are. The greatest fighter alive, and the billion-to-1 shot. Let's start at the top with the most complicated and the most revealing story on this entire list. John Jones, the man who is arguably the greatest mixed martial artist who has ever lived. The man who won the light heavyweight title at 23 years old. The man who has spent his entire career turning enormous talent into enormous controversy in almost equal measure. Jones retired from competition in June of 2025.
John Jones called us last night and retired. John Jones is officially retired.
He vacated the heavyweight championship. He walked away. He had already turned down a $30 million offer to unify the heavyweight title against interim champion Tom Aspinall, a fight the UFC had spent months building toward. His stated reason was legacy preservation. His actual reason, depending on who you ask, was something between fear and strategic stubbornness. Either way, Dana White was left holding a fractured heavyweight division and a very public broken promise. Then 2 weeks after Jones retired, Trump announced the White House card. And John Jones was immediately back. Rejoined the testing pool, started posting training videos.
I will come up with a great strategy, and I'll come with full confidence.
Publicly campaigned for an invitation with a kind of patriotic energy that was new for a man not historically associated with public sentiment. He said it gave him something deeper to fight for, a why that goes beyond paychecks or belts. He talked about fighting for his country. He said that chasing a legacy, something timeless, something bigger than the moment, was what drew him back out of retirement. Dana White's reaction to all of this was measured, immediate, and brutal. At the post-fight press conference following UFC 319, a reporter asked White what Jones could possibly do in the coming months to earn a spot on the card. White looked at the room and said, "Let me ask you, what do you think John would do in the next couple of months that would make me trust putting him on the White House card?" He turned it back on the reporter. He did not even entertain the hypothetical. Then he said, "If I had to make odds, it's 1,000,000,000 that I put John Jones on the White House card. 1,000,000,000 for the greatest fighter alive." Jones responded publicly. He said he was a little disappointed. He said he was still in the testing pool, staying sharp, training like a professional.
Let's remember, spinning elbows, question mark kicks, oblique kicks, that nasty one.
And then he said something that told the whole story of who John Jones is in this stage of his life. He said the fans see his heart, that they see he is ready and willing to represent his country on a historic stage. For a man who spent most of his career not particularly caring what anyone thought of him, this was new territory. The White House card had done something that no title belt had managed in years. It had made John Jones want to be liked. The prestige fight that fell apart before it started. The perfect main event for the White House card, according to almost everyone who analyzed it, was Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira. Two of the most electrifying knockout artists the sport has ever seen. An American legend against an international star. A heavyweight super fight with championship implications. K.L. Sonnen called it low-hanging fruit. Daniel Cormier said it was the most obvious fight in the history of obvious fights. The matchup practically announced itself. Pereira, who had just reclaimed the light heavyweight title with a devastating first-round knockout of Magomed Ankalaev.
To the distance. Oh my God, dude.
Publicly said he wanted Jones publicly said he wanted Pereira. Both men were pointing at each other from across the Atlantic. Dana White acknowledged the matchup was intriguing. For a brief period, it seemed like the White House card was going to produce something genuinely historic. And then Pereira posted a photo of himself with Dana White on Instagram and wrote 4 words. Looks like the White House is a no-go. No explanation, no context, just those words. And a door slamming shut. It was Pereira's way. Direct, unadorned, final. He had apparently been told something in whatever meeting that photo was taken at, and whatever he was told made him go directly to Instagram rather than to an interview or a press conference. The information was released to the world through a social media caption and nothing else. Daniel Cormier said on his YouTube channel that Pereira's withdrawal was the most discouraging news possible for the card. Not because of any single fight, but because Pereira is the kind of fighter whose mere presence on a card tells you there will be a finish. He does not go to decisions. He does not survive rounds on the judges' scorecards. He removes people from consciousness. The White House card without Pereira was a card missing its most reliable source of violence. And then, in another development that felt like the entire story was being written in real time, Pereira vacated the light heavyweight title entirely. He relinquished the belt without ever defending it, cementing a move to heavyweight that had been discussed for months. Jiri Prochazka and Carlos Ulberg were immediately booked to fight for the vacant title at UFC 327. And suddenly, the Jones versus Pereira superfight, declared dead by Pereira's Instagram post in December, was back in the conversation. If Pereira was moving to heavyweight anyway, and Jones was campaigning to fight at the White House anyway, the logic reassembled itself almost despite the previous announcement. By late February 2026, Ariel Helwani was reporting that talks had resumed. The door Pereira had publicly slammed had been quietly pushed back open. What the card will ultimately look like is, as of this writing, still a mystery Dana White has promised to resolve. The comeback that may or may not be happening. Conor McGregor last fought in July of 2021. He broke his leg against Dustin Poirier. He has not competed since. In the years that followed, he has run for president of Ireland, withdrawn from that campaign, appeared at the White House briefing room podium on St. Patrick's Day of 2025, and been found liable by an Irish court for a sexual assault that occurred in 2018. He has also been suspended by the UFC's anti-doping program for 18 months after accumulating 3 whereabouts failures in 2024, missed drug tests that ended a potential return fight against Michael Chandler before it could be scheduled. That suspension expired on March 20th, 2026. Technically, Conor McGregor is now eligible to compete, and technically, the White House card is on June 14th. The timeline works barely, if you assume everything else aligns perfectly. Dana White's position on McGregor and the White House has been the most artfully vague thing he has said about any fighter in recent memory. "We'll see," he has repeated again and again. "We'll see, brother. Not yes, not no." Just a smile and a 3-word sentence that the entire MMA media has been parsing for months. He has also confirmed that the card has been built, that he knows exactly what is on it, and that he will reveal it any day now. What is extraordinary about McGregor's situation is that even his fellow fighters don't believe him. Matt Brown, a veteran of the roster with no particular reason to make things up, said publicly that McGregor is not fighting on the card. That the UFC is using his name to promote it, that he would not believe McGregor was actually fighting at the White House until a punch was thrown inside the octagon in front of him. That is not the kind of thing a colleague says without some basis for the belief. And yet McGregor, for his part, has said he is in negotiations. He has posted training videos from his gym in Ireland. He has said the White House or thereabouts is his target. He has even called for a second fight on the same card, at one point suggesting he could fight Floyd Mayweather in an MMA bout and his regular opponent on the same evening. None of which is the behavior of a man who is definitely fighting at the White House. All of which is behavior that ensures Conor McGregor remains part of every White House card conversation, whether he is booked or not. The champion banned by politics. And then there is the most genuinely bizarre dimension of this entire story. The one that has nothing to do with trust issues or retirements or comeback sagas. The one that is entirely about geopolitics. When Merab Dvalishvili sat down for an interview in January of 2026, he revealed something that landed in the MMA world like a dropped weight. He said the UFC had told him a trilogy fight against bantamweight champion Petr Yan, a fight the organization had promised him, would not be happening at the White House in June. Not because of scheduling, not because of competitive reasons, because Yan is Russian. Dvalishvili reported that the UFC had told him directly that a Russian fighter competing at the White House on Trump's birthday was simply impossible, given the political climate between the United States and Russia. No official policy had been announced. No formal statement was ever released. But if Dvalishvili was telling the truth, and he had no obvious reason to fabricate it, it meant that the politics of a 2-year-old ground war in Eastern Europe had made it inside the octagon. That fighters were being evaluated not for their record, not for their ranking, not for the quality of their fight, but for their passport. Petr Yan responded to the story with the composure of a man who had been navigating this kind of thing for years. He said he had not heard of any definitive ban. He pointed out that the UFC is a massive international organization with fighters from all over the world. He said that allowing Russian fighters to compete at the White House would be an incredible gesture of goodwill and proof that sports can exist outside of politics. And then, in the most Petr Yan thing he could possibly have said, he added a note about the future. He said, "The goal is, first, we take the White House. Then we'll do a huge event in Red Square." It was a joke mostly, but it was also, in its own understated way, a man refusing to accept the premise that his nationality should be a disqualification. The situation extended well beyond Yan. If Russia was being excluded, the implications were enormous. Islam Makhachev, who holds 2 UFC championships after winning the welterweight belt at UFC 322, is from Dagestan. Khamzat Chimaev, the middleweight champion, was born in Chechnya. Dana White later pushed back against the suggestion that the card would be overtly political, saying Russians were still welcome. Chimaev's coaches argued he held Swedish citizenship. None of it was definitively resolved before the card was announced. What was clear was that for the first time in recent memory, the UFC's matchmaking was being shaped not by rankings or competitive merit or box office logic, but by something that existed entirely outside the sport itself. The man who never forgave and the man who wanted to be forgiven. There is one more reaction worth mentioning, because it contains within it the full absurdity of everything that has been described above. It comes from Daniel Cormier, the retired former 2-division champion and current UFC commentator. Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier have one of the most famously contentious rivalries in combat sports history. Their fights were brutal. Their personal animosity was genuine. Jones failed a drug test days before a scheduled rematch at UFC 200 and left Cormier stranded without a fight on one of the biggest cards the organization had ever assembled. The betrayal was not abstract. It was specific and public and damaging. And when Dana White said it was 1,000,000,000 against Jones appearing on the White House card, Cormier said he disagreed, despite everything, despite the personal history and the professional humiliation and all the years of accumulated grievance. Cormier said that Jones versus Pereira was the obvious fight, that the card needed it, that the American icon fighting a Brazilian knockout artist on the south lawn of the White House was exactly what the event was designed for. He said, "I believe that doing Jones versus Pereira, that's low-hanging fruit. You already got 2 guys that say, They want to do that. Put them out there. Jon Jones campaigning to be forgiven with patriotic speeches about legacy and purpose. Daniel Cormier, the man he wronged most directly, arguing for his inclusion. Dana White, the man who built the entire organization around Jones for a decade, saying it was 1,000,000,000 to 1 against. The White House card is not just a fight event. It is a story about who gets invited to the most important room, and what it costs to be trusted with that invitation, and what happens when the greatest fighter in the history of the sport has spent his career being exactly the kind of person you cannot fully trust. The full card will be announced any day. The story is still being written. And in this sport, the most interesting part is almost never what happens inside the octagon.